I'll just introduce the two projects and then we can open the conversation. Then we can start the conversation. Sorry?
You just need to press like this, okay? Forward, backward, okay? That's forward.
So why don't you?
Hi everyone, we're about to start
So I
the
think you
next
started from there,
session.
then I'll do that.
This
You
session
introduce
is
it then.
called Meditative Dot, and it will explore the works by Lahore-based artist Waqas Khan and how he is inspired by Sufi verse and uses his inspiration to draw multiple minuscule dots to form a larger picture. And he will be joined with Salima Hashmi and Alistair Hudson.
Alistair Hicks, actually.
That's a good start. That's a good start.
It says a Hudson.
Well, I'm not Hudson.
So, Waqas would like me to commence so that I can just say a few words about his beginnings. So he's the least likely candidate from the students of his lot who I expected to be talking about. I can be very frank. Because
Let's just finish.
yeah. Because he was this chap who came to NCA primarily because, when I wrote a little piece on him, he used to doodle in the cafeteria at Government College next door. And then the waiter there told him, he'd spend his time better if he tried to go to NCA, where his doodles would be of some consequence. It took him 3 years to make the grade, to actually get a place. 3 years of steady applications. And then, as he told me, he chose the Department of Fine Art because architecture and design would have demanded of him a kind of professionalism and being focused. And he thought he'd had much better time at the sort of rather laissez-faire type of spaces that were there in the Fine Arts Department. So, without any intention to spend his next 3 years being dedicated to his work, he said, quite frankly, he spent it in socializing and having a jolly good time that art students do all over the world. Until finally he sort of got panicky and towards the end of his career there, realized that he had something to do. And then there emerged a new body of work which was focused and had, I think, the first signs of what his journeys were going to be. And so before I hand it over to him so he can talk about this latest phase, I'd just like to do a little quote from Rumi that he says, "This poetry, I never know what I'm going to say. I don't plan it when I'm outside the saying of it. I get very quiet and rarely speak at all." Okay, the next project.
Now it's your turn. You should add a few words as well. Oh, that's him. There's a story as well.
I've got the end. You go next. Absolutely.
All right, so I think they all can hear without the mic as well. Hello, everybody. Like you heard from my dear teacher, Salima Hashmi, she has explained quite a few things. So, it's actually true. I happened to be in the art school, like in a very accidental way. It was just a story, like the way she said it. And if I talk about my work as well, it was an accidental experience as well. There was no planning involved, nothing at all. So, I wanted to introduce you my 2 projects, which I've done last year, and the one is running right now. So I will start from there. So before like from this practice, before you can see on Google and blah blah blah, there's other mediums. So I really wanted to talk about these two projects, which are the new projects. So I started from. Okay, so this is the exhibition which happened in Vienna. It's called History, Memory, or Geometry. Really, everywhere, wherever I exhibit, so there are questions about what I do, basically, from the historical perspective, and because a lot of people put my work into this traditional medium of miniature, and then they start talking about the abstract works mostly. So there's a width. So I just call this exhibition title History, Memory, or Geometry. So the idea was to make the space in a performative way, basically, because as a viewer, when you enter in a gallery or any museum, you always have an idea that you're going to be part of that space and you're going to look for something. So I divided the gallery into 4 or 5 halls. So while you enter in the first hall, this is the first hall. So there are the works, they're white on white. You actually, when you enter this hall, you're unable to see these works. Actually, there are works there. So while you enter this space, you just find these holes like inside the wall. So you just look at, okay, so there's nothing over there. So you just like, okay, what are we doing here? And the next, look at this. That's the type. And there's a second hall. So this second is basically I made this sculpture piece in acrylic glass. So I worked with one of my architect friends. So we developed this technique, so there should be a certain concave quality of this glass. So while you enter in this space, in slightly centimeters, while you enter in this hall, your image starts like disappearing at the same time. You can see the movement, like you can see the movement. You just enter in the space. I'll give you a whole idea why I was doing this when I go through this exhibition. This is the second hall. This is the third hall. Sorry for the picture quality because this is a black on black, so it's just like again you can't see anything, but you are there, you are there. So this is the fourth hall. So actually this hall has my first initial works. So while you enter in this hall, these are green works over there, like a little one. These are one first colors works are there, you can see them actually. So this is the first image you actually saw while you're in that space. So what I created, so while you're in that space, the fourth hall, so you move back to the first hall again. You make a U again, like a performance. So while you're in the first hall, then you actually start seeing it, oh, there are works there. So then the people, they will start investigating about those works again. And then they understand about the sculpture piece, why I made the sculpture piece, because the thing is, while you're looking at the white and white work, so you have to perform yourself in a certain angle to see the work. So the sculpture piece was the idea, when you enter in that hall, you're actually going to see yourself, because you enter in the gallery and you saw yourself. And at the same time you're looking at yourself, your image starts disappearing, like the way you're seeing white on white and black on black. So for me, the viewer was a performer. I was just on the walls. So this was the idea of this exhibition. And after that, I just opened this museum project, which in Mossack, which started on 28th of September. It's on till 2nd of January in Spain. So this is, okay, so they given me the space, like a whole big hall. So there was 2 artists, Matt Mullicum, and we've been allotted these spaces, like 2 spaces. So I did. Basically, the idea is for me, I try to make the space in the space. Right? I just try to visit those spaces first where I'm going to exhibit. I try to be, whatever I can place them over there. So this was the first project. I wanted to talk about this project because this is the first time I started working on canvas. So that's why I wanted to speak about this project, because it's very important, because it's like a little shift for me to work on the canvas piece. First, it was really hard for me because I really don't want to create. I wanted to create the same pattern, but in the same intricacy, in the same intricate form. Like I don't want to create like a big blotch or something like that. For me, it was really hard to make that surface first, to rub it every second, like you just go again and again and again. So I'm very excited about this project of mine. So as you can see, so it's a white canvas. It's a white and white. It's called Memory. These are the close-up of the image, like basically the. Yeah. So actually there are words behind it. It's not like
Are you working with a brush or a pen?
with the pen, with the rapidograph, with the rotring
On the
pen
canvas?
on the canvas, yes.
It's a very fine canvas.
Very fine canvas. I have to prepare that canvas. That canvas is taking at
Yeah.
least 15, 20 days just to prepare that canvas. It's not, you're just coming on the canvas. You have to paint it, you have to scratch it, you have to paint it, you have to scratch it, and then you get the fine quality of the canvas, basically. I just quickly go and just finish this and then we can continue. All right, that's it. Yeah, so this is yeah. Yeah. So now I open the.
I can finish you off. So, I see my role here as basically the outsider, even if I'm the wrong Alistair. I have turned up. So, what I think is very difficult about understanding Waqas's work is looking at it in reproduction. It just doesn't work. It's simply, it often doesn't work even if you see it from a distance. So I thought it was very clever of him to show these mirrors with distorted views of ourselves. Because in a way, his work is, Ansel Adams, I hope I've got the right photographer, said that every work involves two people, the photographer and the viewer. And that's, in this case, it's the artist and the viewer. And basically, Waqas's work is about relationship. It's about your relationship with yourself to a large extent and his relationship with the world. So I thought the best way to explain what I feel about Waqas is to give a brief story about our relationship. We first met very conventionally. We were sitting at Art Basel in a big art dinner, and luckily no one was there, because the other people on the table were very dull. Very dull indeed. And after a while we were sort of diagonally across, and we sort of fixed on each other as relief and started talking, and then that got involved, and then I managed to buy some work for Deutsche Bank, and we started talking. At that stage, you were very much working on paper with pencil, and as I worked on paper collection, it was very, very useful. But what I saw there very much echoed with what I thought was happening around the world. And so I included Waqas in a show called Double Think, Double Vision, which was mainly with artists, the pioneers in that were Russian artists. And it was really about how we are communicating nowadays and how our thinking has changed quite dramatically. And why Waqas's work really struck a chord with me is because, for me, he is a writer, he uses a writing pen, but if you just look at what's there, you've just got lots of dots or lots of circles. It really is completely abstract. So I've looked at it as like a book, but at the same time, Theodore Adorno very cleverly said that that you have a relationship with books even before you open them, even before you read them, even if you never read them. And I think that is very much the case with Waqas, because what you get, it's not what you remember from good books, is the emotions, the relationship. Okay, you're seduced by the occasional good phrase, the good passages, and you're seduced by his passages in but you get the same emotion, and he's managed to, because abstract art really was the great invention of the last century. But by the end of the last century, it had come to a complete dead end, really, because abstract thinking is an impossibility. Because even if two people, even if I had, say, for example, I had an abstract idea, what I think is an abstract idea, how could I communicate it to you? Because all communication is friction, and it relies on that. Abstract art on the whole, I'm afraid, is a male fantasy. It's a sort of linear, the Brancusi phallus that goes up into the world. It's an extension of the macho image that things can go in a straight line. And Waqas, he's got a certain machismo. But in a way, his art is, there is some feminine side in your art. And so that's what I find. So with why I was interested, Double Think, Double Vision was started by Soviet artists who I went to visit another person who does a lot of work on paper, Pavel Pepperstein. And I'd been writing about his work. We had a floor in the Deutsche Bank called the Pavel Pepperstein floor, but I hadn't really known what to say about him, because it was, Edward Said would say that I was looking at his work in an exotic sort of way. But when I went into his studio, I went and we went, he said, oh, you must come and listen to some films that a friend of his grandfather made. And suddenly we were looking lots of films from the Soviet era, and then a television period, a very funny program, which there was a Russian hero who was an SS officer, but he was really a Russian spy. There was a real cute, but they were really funny. And so I said at the end of watching them to Pavel, how could your Soviet ancestors and you afford to be so funny? And he looked at me and he said, well, you probably think of doublethink as a negative concept. And I said, yes, Orwell's last 5 chapters, one of the most soul-destroying destruction of the individual by the state, the way they try and take over your thinking. And he said, well, here in Russia, we just think of doublethink as the beginning. And then I just thought, wow, that is what's going on around the world. And that's what I think happens in his work. You see, there's a lot, because he's letting you use not the distorted mirrors that I think it's like playing jokes on us, which is good. But in the work, you can find lots of contradictory thoughts and you can hold them together. And that is what I think has happened in the internet and post-internet age. We are getting a true modernist world. And in the past, in the beginning of the 20th century, we didn't get that, because although they were trying to level up get everything back to base zero and starting again using all cultures, the people who were running the art world at that time, the main artists were all men, they were all classically educated, and so we didn't get that. But now, we are getting that. Before I hand back to you, Waqas, I'd like you all to imagine Waqas in his studio, and I know I've no reason to do that because he berates me. I haven't yet been to Lahore and to see, but if you imagine the amount of time he spends in there, and he's a big caged tiger, isn't he? You can just see him working away. And I know the frustration he has, because I'm sure some of you have received those messages when he stops painting. Ping, 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 ping. So it's an enormous sort of frustration there. And so those dots, the circles, I think was quite a controlled, but it was also quite a controlling his world. And so I feel when you've broken out into canvases, it's like breaking out of the cage to a certain extent. And so you saw those later works on there where there were lines, and it was like a sort of longing for freedom. That's enough of me, I think.
Just as an aside, the best jokes are those that emanate in times of dictatorships, as we've learnt in Pakistan. It is the funniest time because you see the farce that actually informs a dictatorship. So that's just as an aside.
Yeah, well, it makes your brain work very hard to be able to communicate, doesn't it? Yeah, yeah.
But I'd just like to pick on from what you're talking about, because having observed the journey, I'm sort of intrigued by the way that there came a point, which I noticed in Waqas's work, in which I truly felt that actually the mark was leading the artist rather than the other way around, because it was so adamant in the way that mark followed, that I felt that he was actually being led somewhere, which was quite an intriguing phenomenon to observe from where I was looking at it. And I sometimes wondered if he was even conscious of the fact that there was something which was leading him into this sort of repetitive mode, because the music that came about as a result of this mark making was something that was apparent in Bennett. He said, okay, this one is done. I am just wondering if, now that he seems to be much more in control, inverted commas, when he moves from Wesley onto canvas, which what you describe as a kind of freedom, I'm wondering whether it's going to be the opposite, actually, that he will start leading the mark rather than the mark leading him. And
Well,
I just saw the transition. I was in the studio where you had to go.
Yeah, I do.
And I could sense there was that struggle, because with the Wesley, it's not only the way the Wesley behaves, but there is a kind of history to that whole surface. Yeah. And the history that is almost embedded in the way that surface responds when the mark comes to
Yeah.
it. When you come to the canvas, which he was struggling with, doing
Yeah.
what he was doing on the paper,
Yeah.
and it wasn't working.
Yeah. No, I totally. I know what you're talking about. The mark leading the man, and it's particularly. I think everyone who's gone through art school has been taught about that endlessly. But in a way, for me, the marks or what it's not about him. I'm wanting, and I know another artist, a Scottish artist who did triangles for us. He was basically out of his mind on drugs for years. But but he got out of it, and he's become a very well-known artist, so I won't just say who it was. But I would love to do a show with Waqas, with a photographer. And the photographer does works that, without using a camera, that show streams. And she's very interested in basically the stream of consciousness. So going back to the beginning of modernism. And she, for instance, every so often, she will go into a field that she owns in Dartmoor, and she will not take any books, she doesn't see anyone, and the whole point is just to let her mind wander. And she says her mind, the more the time she has, it works like water. And Waqas's work is like that. You see the currents, you see the way we think. And so for me, it's not what he's about is nothing too formal, although it is really it's very composed. So, but you know, that is what it's going back to relationship.
But it is formal.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yes.
I need to add something because if you look at the whole form even of this construction of the work is just like there's a very definitive form of the work. Like it's a circle or it's a triangle or these are little dots which are very designed way.
Yeah.
So if I talk about my interaction with the architecture or something, I look at my work as a construction, an experience of myself while sitting in the studio, breathing in and breathing out. It is like, if you just suppose you're making this whole structure as a building, like you're just making this building. From outside, you're just looking at the geometrical form. And the same way, when you look at my work, you will find, okay, there's a circle, there's a very defined form. But if you look at inside, there's a lot of functionality is happening, just like the architecture. There's like a whole writing, there's a whole day, like this is a whole routine of my life is there. Just like here, like you have this space has a functionality. So this is how I find this whole structure of my work. It is, but with the patterns like the white and white, or you can just I was just talking about earlier about white and black and I'm looking for something which is omnipresence of the image as well. Maybe something which intricate, which is like give you an idea and you feel like, okay, you wanted to get involved with this work. I want you to be stuck with the work for a few seconds. I want you to hold yourself when you're looking at something. I know it's madness, like you were saying. It's just I'm sitting there and I'm a giant. Exactly. Exactly. I am. Like look at my hands. Like it's so big, and at the same time I'm working, and I know very little about what I'm doing. Very little. But while I'm doing it, this whole experience is leading me somewhere, which I don't know. Which I don't know. And you were absolutely right, which I don't know.
But is it because you have always been interested in architecture and spaces and everything, but would you say that your work is really like the architecture of your mind?
No, I would say I call it as like a little story of my whole existence that time. what is happening around me in that time. I'm constructing it. I'm writing like an expression. Like it's these lines might be words for me in another expression. Like you just looking at a dot or line for me, they are like words. So I don't know. I'm just a hand in this whole process. And this whole, I would say that basically it is not about. Apparently, from my childhood till now, I don't know so many things. I just ended up in NCA, working as an artist. What she says, because she knows me like anything. Like it is for me, everything was an accidental. Still today, like whatever like if I wanted to do something, even with your exhibition or the project I was doing, I never planned anything. I just go there. I just see things. Okay, I'm going to do this. Like. I'm working on this work now. I'm going to shift. The canvas was a challenge. Just think about the canvas was a challenge. So I won't call it, okay, what it is. I still don't know. I'm here to learn. I don't know what it is. Still.
What would you have done if he produced the white on white at the university?
Well, luckily I was not teaching at that time. I would have told him, go back to school.
But you were my juror.
Yeah. But I think that, what you had said earlier about the machismo, I think there is an aspect that wanting to do larger and larger environments, which therefore, when he's going into this thing about, okay, so you're engineering the fact that the viewer or the participant, if you like, is going to move from this space to that space to that space. So there is that desire to really control, or not in the sort of very obvious sense, but sort of move people into a particular direction.
Very good.
So that comes out of every artist's, I suppose, desire to be omnipotent, to be omnipresent, to be universal. To be the creator, and I think that comes a lot from the kind of person he is, from the kind of, where he emerged from, this desire really to bring people in and expanding your consciousness and taking people along with him. Having said that, if I have a critique of Waqas, it is that it is not yet seen in this manner in Pakistan. And so therefore it is, I've sort of berated him many times, the way that he has you to come to his studio. I've berated him many times that he has to construct this kind of a space in Pakistan, so that there are many more participants who started out with him become part of the journey. And so I'm saying this in this situation over here, that you have, for something so personal, because the way that he works is intensely personal, my fear is always that then the person becomes a gallery artist. And that to me, I know that you'll oppose this.
It's my job.
Yeah. And, for me, they have to constantly be rooted, and they have to be there, even if they're here. There has to be this back and forth, because he is somebody who has the great privilege of communicating across many cultures and many places, and his exhibitions are seen in Spain, Austria. So I feel that it's time to be seen in Lahore, in Karachi, in Islamabad.
Yeah, I think it's a very good idea. Then he won't bother us over here. Can you keep him locked up? No, but at the same time, there is always a prophet is never appreciated in his own
True.
home
Very
area.
true.
In the
But
same.
we don't
Their
know,
heads
he
locked
hasn't
off.
shown in his own
God,
home.
he's
That's the
he's
point.
so shy. That's the trouble. That
He
is
is
the
very
trouble.
shy. I
That's the point.
I'm British.
So I think it's up to everyone in Lahore and in Pakistan to commission him to do.
We've tried.
You have your, has he been just, I can knock him off the head.
So if there is any questions, please.
Yeah.
So I have a question. You say that to you, your lines are words. Do you recognize them when you go back to them?
Yeah, exactly.
You do?
Exactly. I know every mark of my work.
That's what I'm asking you.
Yeah, I'm growing with it. It's just not like I'm sitting in the studio. I'm growing. My whole body is getting affected. The whole time I'm spending there, so I know every mark and where I'm putting the dot. Everything I know about it.
But can you go back? When you go back, you recognize that this was when I
Did this.
There are a few stories I remember
Yeah,
because my
yeah.
brain is like a washing machine.
So
It's running all the time because there are few things I remember because there are certain places. If you look at my work, you find little interruptions even there's a pattern is bring. I'm not designing it intentionally.
No.
It's just coming and I'm just letting it go. So I remember those parts because you living in the society, there are so many things that are happening. I'm not talking about those things directly, but I am getting affected by so many things as well. It's not about just to talk about the other stuff there, but I'm explaining in another way, which is luckily or somehow the people are getting involved with that. And apparently the work is giving, when Salima said me something, 4 or 5, because she's the one who always visits me, by the way. Like off the record, nobody does it, but she does. She said to me, actually this work literally made you a humble man. And she's right. I literally, after these work, after the work, because I was like an animal in the college, and this work literally made me to be patient guy, like very patient guy. So this is the effect on me.
So that leads me to my second question, because
Please.
you called it the meditative dot,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
So the whole idea of meditation is, I always used to think that people meant empty your mind, but of course it's not that.
No,
it's
not.
quite the opposite.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
focus your
Yeah,
mind.
yeah.
So
Yeah,
is
it's
that-
very focused. Because just think about it, the material I use even is permanent. So just think
Yeah.
about that, because it's permanent. You cannot remove the ink. You cannot. So you need. It's a very concentrated and very focused job. It's not. It's just like that. Yeah.
What made you try canvas?
Canvas was because the size limitation. Now I'll show you the sizes.
It's going to take over the world.
Because
Why not a brush?
no, the brush is because
It
I
can
have.
also give you the marks.
Yeah, I have to learn about brush. I don't.
It's like pada for a miniature
Yeah.
painter. It's the little marks that they make. And
Yeah.
I think that's precisely where his work differs from the craft of the miniature painter. Because that is very dependent on this a very delicate, sort of almost layer upon layer, while with him, he totally separates, the surface and the mark. That there is, a very clear distinction between the two. Even when you encounter the surface, it seems, okay, everything is, woven in the warp and the weft of the thing is very clear. But in fact, it's almost in contradiction to the way the miniature painter works.
But there are different kinds of miniature
exactly.
paintings.
No, that is true.
There are painters who are in Bahari, the Bahari painters who depict the
who are
water.
laying the marks next to one another. But I think that is possibly not the way that he would go at all.
But what I was trying to say was use the brush.
But why?
Go on, because it'll make the same marks.
But he's
I mean, he's got ink.
I'll learn from
He wants to whack us.
Think about it. He does painting is learning.
Come.
Slides.
Yeah, they can show you.
The technical person. अगर लोगों को तराज ना हो इसलिए
No, you
बातचीत
can
के-
say it, please.
नहीं मगर बातचीत के बाद जरा कुछ और
Ji,
पूछना।
sure.
But
But-
Waqas, can you talk about the way you manipulated the canvas?
The canvas,
Because you've changed.
Yeah. The canvas, it was, it was more like an experiment because the limitation of the firstly, there's also limitation. So I wanted to, because I've been asked to have an exhibition in different places, I need to have something else.
Right.
And if you look at the Vasli, there's in canvas, I find something very magical about it. There's a certain relief on the canvas, actually. And I really love it. This is something. And even the first time when I've done it, so after that, I started working with my couple of friends. Give me the canvas. Let's start experimenting. How I can get the same quality.
Precisely, you're trying to make the canvas behave like a
Best
Vasli.
like.
Yeah.
Exactly.
To get finer
Give me-
grades
and-
in canvases.
Exactly, because the mark has to be the same size. What I've been doing, because I don't want to create the big marks, okay, now there's another meaning. I wanted to create the same story, same rhythms in that one piece of canvas. In sense of something like that.
What is the treatment that you give to the canvas?
There's a gesso. Gesso, we do the gesso, but
Do
at the
you-
same time we scribe the canvas all the time.
Do you
Because I
use-
need to have the quality of like a paper. So you paint it and you remove it. You
Yes.
paint it, you remove it. It's like a 15, 20 days job. It's like a very, very long job. Because it has to be soft.
Absolutely. Like
The
water.
pedograph has to work on the canvas.
Do you use not artificial gesso? Or do you use the traditional gesso?
No,
using
the art-
gum-
The which is available, archival ones, which is archival ones.
Try the rabbit skin glue and try the
Okay, I don't know about that.
the icon painters. I can give you the recipe.
Okay.
Try it. It'll be magic for your work.
Okay. Thank
The
you.
fineness. Yes.
Thank you.
Absolutely. I love his work actually. I mean, it's so delicate. It pulls you in, and you want to see his lines. And
I have a question about your doodling days.
Yeah.
Because I have a daughter who's only 12, but when she's stressed or she wants to relax, she goes into a room and doodles and doodles and doodles and doodles. And I will get a little card for Christmas with a doodle this size, which she spent 5 days on. I just want to know, how does it make you feel doing that doodle? So that I understand her better.
That's a nice question.
I'm not sure I'd accept him as my psychiatrist.
It is true.
Yeah,
It
I
is
see the
true.
same thing. Yeah, so
It will literally make me calm. In my studio, I feel very, very, very good. Like a very just. We have in the studio. This is like. Please understand it. Please, because thank you for you all came for this talk first of all. But please understand. This is impossible work. It is not like it's you holding the pen with two hands. It just and I had no intention of becoming an artist even from please, you have to link everything. So this work made me what this is why I'm sitting here. So for me it is like having a life with this work. I feel so good whenever I'm working. And rest of the time, I'm the most disorganized man ever happened on earth, I would say. Exactly. So I have so many. The studio's life is mine. Is like something which is very so sacred, which is so lovely for me. Just like I sit in the studio for hours and hours and hours and hours, and just keep on doing it. And my whole body, I'm very tall, it's my whole body. You need to understand, I have to design those tables, I have to design everything, I have to rotate the sheet 1,000 times just to go exactly at the same mark. Please understand. It is not just, okay, yes. I'm putting a dot. It's a very, like, you need to go to the same mark, you need to push the paper every second, like you're rotating the paper every second. And just to go like this, it is whole labor of involved, but at the same time there's no fatigue anymore. Like, I love it.
So when you're writing a narrative, you have a beginning and you have an idea of where you're going. You said you're led by the work. Do you have a point where you say, okay, this particular design or this particular theme has been explored enough. This is
Yeah.
the end of my chapter,
Yeah.
this is the end of my book,
Yeah,
and now I want to do something else.
exactly.
Okay.
I haven't started yet. I just, no,
The best is
I haven't
yet to
started
come.
yet. I just,
Count on the cake.
I haven't started it yet. Yeah.
We're waiting.
Sorry.
No, but I'm told that you are soon going to be doing something in Pakistan which people can enjoy without letting the cat out of the bag, because I think that will engage you for a while. What about this business of when you're, I mean, I'm talking about something very pedestrian from something that, you know, there is the gallery circuit, and if you're part of the gallery circuit, it can inhibit the way that you want to work sometimes, because they are demanding things of you. How capable are you of refusing, or, you know, deciding, okay, this is, you know, what I'm not going to do? Does the artist have a choice? Does the artist have the freedom to refuse?
He can refuse.
He is rather too.
I'll vouch for that.
I think, are we talking about the same Waqas? You must have had him at the right moment. I think.
Ma'am, there's always a conversation about certain projects and stuff like that, but I've been very lucky in this case that I engage with my gallerist and the people I'm working with in a certain way that if I like it, I do it. Otherwise, there's no chance of me being there. No one can push me, because I'm still happy to be. Again, when you know how I was, please, this is something which is I cannot even explain. It is something which is very close to me. I love it. I can possess. Even I'm doing it in my studio and keeping it with me. I'll be happy. I'll be happy with the little life. It's just something. I'm not a madman sitting in the studio, but there are a few conversations we always have about other certain projects. But I simply refuse things when I don't feel like doing things. That is another way of seeing it. Yeah. But it's hard, I know. But there's a lot of rifts involved, but it's okay. Yeah.
We have a question here.
Please.
Waqas, I want to ask you something.
Please. Thank you, George.
Tell me one thing. I'm very involved with art, and you know that, you know. And you are an international figure right now. Are you going to be dictated by big galleries on your work or no? Because that's my main question.
No. No, none of my galleries still, because Alistair has been working with me for a long time, and Marine is here, and she's very much connected with my both agents, and she knows everything. Apparently, none of them ever said something like, okay, Waqas, we're doing this. Can you do something else? No, because you know the best part is because I had a residency with them. They've saw me how I work. They have seen me inside their spaces. So maybe they have this knowledge of me as a human as well. Like, okay, he is like this way. He's inside his studio, he's working, and don't disturb him or something like that. So this is how it works. So they don't dictate me for anything. Exactly. Yeah.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Yeah.
Thank you. Do we have any more questions or comments?
Okay.
So, if I may end with 2 lines from Rumi.
Yes, certainly.
Listen to the presences inside poems. Let them take you where they will.
Thank you.